After living in our camper full time and doing some traveling and some mooch docking and some boondocking, and while we remodel our house, these are 8 things I wish we would have known before we started in full-time RV life.
It's the modern age. It's 2025 now, but we moved into a camper in 2023, and against our friends and family, it was definitely weird. But once we got into this space, there are tons of people who live in a camper full time.
Yeah, as I said, it wasn't like our own original idea to go live in a camper full time at all. We definitely saw other people out there doing it, but to be the first ones in like our group, our circle, yeah. It was like, you guys are kind of weird. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So that it definitely doesn't feel weird anymore. Mm-mm. It almost feels weird to
call it weird.
Thinking about living in a house feels weird to us when you get rid of all your possessions and you downsize. We went from a 3-bed, 1-bath house. It was a small farmhouse to this.
But it was still 1,300 square feet.
Right, like 300 square feet. There's a lot of realizing the things you don't need anymore.
We have a minimalist opinion anyway. Like
right.
we never have been the type of people to really hold on to a bunch of things. So it wasn't hard for us to get rid of things. I do think it's funny that the common thing I've heard is once you get a house, like you can have your clothes back. And I was like, no, actually, I don't want all of those things back again.
I mean, more than 4 t-shirts would probably be ideal.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah.
But I guess where we were going with that is there are a lot of people who live in a camper, full-time, part-time, temporary, whether you're building your homestead from scratch, you want to travel, maybe you want to travel part-time. We met a lot of people who have a house but traveled part-time. We met a lot of people who are renovating. I mean, I didn't even had a family member who was renovating their house and they lived in a camper.
Right.
So there are a lot of different reasons why someone would move into a camper, and thanks. I'm really glad that we did, but it's really cool to see that like it's not that weird.
It's not at all. Number 2 thing that I feel like we wish we would have known is truck size versus camper. And I know that sounds pretty obvious, but we got a lot of bad advice.
There's a lot of opinions out there on the internet, and a lot of people say, oh, that truck, it'll be fine, or no, you need to go much bigger.
You need a semi to pull your bumper pull pop up.
There are a lot of opinions out there, and we feel like we made the wrong decision starting out.
I mean, we did the best with the information that we were presented with.
For
you
sure.
Look at the GVWR in a truck and you look at the GVWR on a camper and you're like, oh, that mass, not necessarily. And we were also in a situation where, just so you guys kind of know, we started off with a 2020 F250, 350? Non-dually gasser. Where we were in Indiana, that's all we could find. 2023, we could not find. Diesels were impossible to come by and dualies were impossible to come by.
Or they were obnoxiously expensive.
Right, and now I'm saying that as we got to our 43-foot fifth wheel behind us, because
right.
we started off in a travel trailer just to try and, that's what we moved into when we sold everything, but to kind of see like what features and such were important to us.
We reached out to a bunch of people asking what we should do, internet, friends and family, and that's the decision that we made. But what we found is that pulling this monstrosity through the hills in Tennessee with the F350 gas single wheel, it wasn't going to work out. So once we got down south and sat for a minute, we went to go find Rhonda because we needed a bigger truck.
That's true. So my only advice there is there's lots of research you can do. If you're going to post that question on Facebook, just be prepared for the wildest comments you can possibly imagine. Mm-hmm. Everyone's a complete expert on it, but just my general solution is thinking about what are you going to use it for. So if you're going to travel, get a truck much bigger than what the camper would ever be.
It's better to have too much truck than not enough truck and be broke down with a busted engine or transmission on the side of the road.
Right.
That's our personal opinion. Also, what we found is the gas pumps are impossible to pull in and out of with 43 feet behind you. So that was another big reason why we got a diesel, because then we could use the semi pumps and we had plenty of space to get in and out. So that's another big consideration too. I even saw the other day someone with a bigger camper. I mean, it was probably like 35 feet. So
Okay.
it wasn't super long. It wasn't as big as ours, but it was tight with that gas truck getting into that gas station.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind if you're traveling often. If you're doing it once every now and then, it might not be that big of a deal, but ease, damage. I mean, that's how we damaged our camper.
Easy killer.
Well, I'm just saying.
I know.
We were in the gas truck, we took a swing, and we hit a post. Yeah, that's something to keep in mind.
So our third tip is that all of these campers are A, not built the same, B, they're not great quality, and C, there's a big difference between Sydney.
Okay, just run through.
All right, there's reality of kids and full-time RV living. So there's a big difference between a 2-season or a 4-season camper. So it just depends on what you're going to look for or what your needs are going to be if you're going to live in a camper full-time. Obviously your climate's a huge thing, but obviously 4-season, it's a heated underbelly, typically better insulated.
The year that they were built means
Correct.
a lot. The older models are a lot better quality. They were just made thicker, bustier. These new ones, this is a 2023, so anything made after COVID. I think after, was it 2024, they finally went back to
They're kind of
good
getting
quality.
back to quality again.
But the 2020s are like 23s. They're just made with like toothpicks. They are not all built the same, and there is a bunch of advertisement, and the salesmen really just want to make a sale. So if you aren't sure even where to start talking to people that have them and what they like about it. There are so many things to consider. Traveling, do you want to go to the bathroom while you're traveling? That was big for us because
With 2 small kids, bathroom breaks are more, we have to stop more often with 2 small kids for potty breaks between her and these 2 small children.
And the trucker stops aren't always the cleanest. And when you've got 2 kids that are trying to potty train
Right.
and want to be big and want to sit on the toilet, I would feel better about using our own bathroom.
There's a lot of comfortability there too.
Yeah.
That they really took in with having their own toilet.
They felt more comfortable to go, especially if we're on the road for a whole day and the 4-year-old's got to go number 2, but he doesn't want to go in public. We can stop. He can have his break, his minute, have his privacy in the comfort of his own bathroom. So that was really, really important to us that we were able to access the bathroom on a travel day. Even though we only moved once a month,
Right.
it was worth it to us.
I will also say though, with them being built so cheaply, is either trying, if you're not a handy person, try and become a handy person, but there's something definitely to knowing how the components, where the water pump is, that kind of stuff, and knowing how to fix it. If you don't know how to fix it, I promise you there's tons of internet videos on YouTube to try and teach you those things, even replacing water heaters or whatever. These things go through an earthquake every time you move them. So if you move them once a week or you move them once a month or every 6 months, no matter your living situation in them full time, every time it moves, it's like rolling it down through an earthquake. And even your sticks and bricks house, if you had an earthquake every month, things would be falling apart. So if you're not a handy person, try to become one. If not, there's plenty of resources out there. I know there's also schools out there you can pay for that specialize in RV maintenance and that kind of stuff. So if you aren't a handy person, just look into those resources because they do require a lot of upkeep and a lot of maintenance, especially the more you move them.
So also when you're choosing a camper, it's important to know about your living space versus your bed space. For us, it's broken up. So we have a designated living space in the front and our beds are in the back. And that was important to us, again, having small kids, that if Sydney's taking a nap or if Sydney wakes up at 4 in the morning and Paul and Lincoln are sleeping in,
Whoa, killer.
okay, if Sydney wakes up at 4 in the morning and Olivia and Lincoln are sleeping in, then Paul and Sydney can still have their morning and not worry about disturbing anybody. So that might not be important to people with older kids or if it would just be me and Paul, but with having 2 small kids, that was actually really important that we could separate that space because in our first camper, we couldn't separate that space very well. I mean, if you're looking for a different camper, even if it's just temporary, you still want to be comfortable. No, you don't want it to be the worst experience of your life.
So our recommendation for that is when you are shopping campers, think about what your lifestyle you want to be if you're going to live in it full time and really think about your day in and day out on it. From not just travel days, but your like every day in that thing. Does someone have to work from home? Does someone have to get up at 4 a.m. to go to work? All of those things are things to consider. So honestly, when you are beginning to look for a camper, think about that first before you go looking at campers, and look at every floor plan and see how that would fit to your needs.
Yeah.
Because our first camper to our second camper, not only are they drastically different in size and layout, but that's something we didn't truly consider when we started.
Yeah.
And the long term if you are going to live in it full time.
Yeah.
So our tip number 5, that things we didn't, but you don't know, and just from experience, is how much these things depreciate. Obviously, you always hear the story when you drive a new car off the lot, it depreciates. It doesn't matter if it's used, it's new, or it's stolen. These things depreciate so fast. So if you're going to live in it full time, we always recommend being debt-free. Not advice we listen to ourselves on this one, but at the same time, we knew we were going to live in it full time. It was worth it for us, but at the same time, we know the resale on it just falls off immediately upon buying it. So that's just the reality of the situation. Just something to kind of keep in mind if you're thinking about full-time life in this is cash versus loan versus what are you looking for?
Yeah. So the next thing, speaking of campers and quality, that it's important to consider is the solar package. We were so excited that this camper had solar on it. Like, we were over the moon.
Which is, come to find out, like,
well,
all of them. Yeah.
That's where I was going. So we were over the moon that had a solar package. Most of them have solar on them. But what we found out the hard way is that the solar capacity is like this much. You can turn a light on and the fridge runs while you're traveling. But when on our way down south, we were in Alabama and it got cold and the furnace kicked on and we were like, oh, well, we have solar, so the batteries are charged, it's fine. Well, it turns out the batteries are crap, and the fan for the furnace was so powerful that it drained all of our batteries, and we were stuck until morning when the solar could charge again, because all of our jacks were down. We were still hooked to the truck even. It was a disaster. So just know that if you are excited about solar, you'll have to upgrade your batteries and maybe your panels.
Yeah, so really do your research on solar if that's important to you. Boondocking, mooch-docking, being without shore power is really important to you, because just because it has solar doesn't mean it's worth anything.
Yeah. Another thing to consider, whether you're going to travel full-time or just take a trip here and there, is that there are parts of this country that are easier and harder to get through. The Northeast for us was very, very difficult. Everything is very narrow. They were made for horses and carriages. They were not made for a dually truck and a 44-foot fifth wheel behind it. The famous story is in Vermont, we were trying to get to Morgan Gold's, and the directions told us to go a certain way, and Paul starts turning towards this bridge.
The caveat to that is they just had massive flooding.
Lots
of the roads were taken out.
Yes.
There's that caveat.
Yes, so we couldn't go the way that the trucker app was telling us to go because the road was washed out. So Paul turns towards this bridge, and I just say, 12-6, 12-6, 12-6. That's the height of the bridge, and that was what was posted, and our clearance is 13.6. Mm-hmm. So we very much would not have made it over that bridge. And so he is doing all of these things with the wheel, and we cut off some traffic, and it got a little chaotic there for a second. So just things to think about and consider that we didn't realize. Know some of the conditions of the roads before you get there. Like, for another example, thankfully we had friends tell us not to go through New York City because the potholes were so bad that it totaled their camper. So we went around New York City. We didn't get to see anything, which was sad, but at least our camper was intact.
Thankfully. The next one is with water in, water out. So when we got into this, we know that our camper comes with a storage tank, and it has a water pump, and you can hook up to city water, and those are all nice features. But depending on what you're doing with your camper and full-time living can really make that a big difference. So like going to campground, not all campgrounds are the same. Does that mean water, electric, septic? Every campground has different rules, or resort or whatever.
Well, and then there was that one that you parked your camper and then had to truck your own water. And we had a bladder bag.
We had to buy a bladder bag.
Yeah, but it took forever, and that was not ideal.
So kind of knowing what kind of lifestyle you want to live with the camper, and then even with mooch docking or boondocking, do you have access to unload your tanks, unload your black, your grays? Do you have availability to hook a hose up? Like, all of those things are things to consider. It's not the unlimited hot showers, and the ability to do all the dishes is not always the case.
Yeah.
So kind of knowing what you're going for, and kind of just keep that in the back of your mind, that you're not always going to have the availability to have everything with your camper.
Yeah. And water is such a luxury that we take full advantage of too much, I believe, in society. And that's kind of where my brain has gone now, is I am always conscientious about water. And I hope it stays that way. I hope that I will always be worried about water going forward. Having the camper has really opened my eyes to just how much water we use. When we have to put it in and take it out, we realize just how much water we actually use.
You definitely think about things like, you guys don't need a plate to put your toast on.
Yeah.
Get a paper towel. Like, that sounds wasteful, but it's just like, I don't have the water to wash that plate.
Right.
So.
Or you only had toast on that plate. You can use it.
Yeah, use it for something else.
So it's been interesting. So we kind of alluded to it in previous points, but just because you live in a camper full-time doesn't mean that you have to travel. And just because you travel full-time doesn't mean that you have to settle down somewhere. What's really awesome about camper life is that it is flexible, and it can be exactly what you need it to be. When we were ready to stop traveling, we didn't just go buy a house. We stayed in Indiana for a little while in our camper. We came down here. We stayed at a campground for a little while we were like getting familiar with the area. So it gives you the flexibility, and it also gives us the flexibility, like as we're remodeling, it doesn't have to be done today. Are we ready to be out of the camper? Yes. Are we ready to be in a house? Yes. But we have the flexibility to stay in here as we need to. And that's a nice fallback, I think.
For sure.
So there are so many different reasons why someone would want to live in a camper. If you're remodeling, if you want to travel at any capacity, once a year, every week, however you want to do it, it's a really fun life, and we've really enjoyed it. It's brought our family a lot closer.
Yeah.
And we got rid of a bunch of crap we didn't need.
You realize how much stuff you have when you're just like when not only you're just having the yard sale, but you're like, just give me an offer. Like, I just don't want it anymore.
Yeah, just take it for free. I don't care. I don't want to have it in my possession anymore.
So we hope this video was able to help you guys a little bit. We've been in our camper for over 2 years now, our camper life full time for over 2 years. We've enjoyed every single moment of living in a camper. We've learned a lot, but we felt like there was a lot that we had to offer and give advice for things that we wish we would have known before we started, especially when you have 2 small kids. There's lots of advice out there from either young couples or retired couples, and those are great videos and great advice, but there's not a lot of advice on families with kids living in a camper full time. Thank you so much for watching with us, coming along with us today. We have tons of videos about our farm and what we're doing now, and we appreciate every single one of you, and we will catch you on the next one.